Cheron Mix 92.3 special guest today, former Detroit Police Chief James Craig. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Let me ask you about your time as police chief. What is the biggest lesson you learned?
The one thing that was so important, Detroit had a pretty substantial activist community, like Detroit 300, Detroit, and they didn't necessarily hold the Detroit Police Department on high. And so coming in the door, one of the things that I wanted to do really was build a relationship, build that bridge.
Right.
I understand their concerns. I understood the concerns of the community, but I knew I needed to bring back the reputation of the Detroit Police Department, which we did, but build relationships with those great people, which we did. And I got to tell you, it was a lot of work.
Yeah.
We went into it knowing we're not going to always agree.
Right.
And so leaders know one thing: bring folks together, knowing you may not agree, but when you are a public servant serves who? People.
The public, yeah.
They serve people.
Yeah.
And so because we serve people, we built relationships with folks, knowing that we are going to have differences. And I would tell you, those groups worked so well with the Detroit Police Department. In fact, when every city was burning around America, guess which one didn't burn?
Absolutely.
Detroit didn't burn. And it didn't burn because, candidly, we had relationships with people. We had some sound leadership, and that mattered.
All right, hold that thought, because I want to talk more about that, more about specifically what happened here in Detroit during the George Floyd protests. My conversation with former Detroit Police Chief James Craig continues. Continuing my conversation with former Detroit Police Chief James Craig. Now, during the George Floyd protests, I was really impressed to see you side by side with your officers. How important was it for you to be on the ground?
Well, I'll tell you, when I think back and I look at the effect it had, so I had two factions. Because as a public servant, not only do I serve the public, the people, I serve the men and women who wear the uniform.
That part.
And I will tell you, 100 plus days of protests. There were some very difficult days. We were in the middle of a pandemic, but the fact that our officers saw me side by side with them really made a difference. They stood fast, they stood strong, we were consistent, and then to the protesters. And I'm not talking about necessarily the ones that were peaceful. Most of them were peaceful.
Yeah.
But the few that were, focused on one thing, to create disruption, commit crimes, they saw me too. And because they saw me, they knew, well, if the leader is here, we're going to stand down.
Former Detroit Police Chief James Craig is my guest today, and you're running for governor of Michigan. Let's get into that. My conversation with former Detroit Police Chief James Craig continues. After decades of law enforcement, you are now running for Michigan governor. What an evolution
of public service.
Wow.
You know what? I'll tell you, because I get asked the question, why and why now?
I was going to ask you that.
Well, I got to tell you, and it's a great question to ask. Why now? We know it. I don't have to say it. We're divided as a state. Everything is partisan. We're divided as a country. Everything centers on partisan. And what gets lost in the conversation, who are we representing? We're representing the people. We represent them. And some of the issues, when you look at what's going on across our country today, whether it's inflation, high gas, but see, these in my mind, these are not partisan issues. You got to be able to really bring Republicans and Democrats together for the betterment of the people. And that's not political. That's what public servants do who are in leadership. So I'm very keen on saying you have political servants serve self. Public servants serve others. And that's what differentiates me from the current governor and anybody else in this contest.
It's the road to the election. Looking forward to your documentary and your book. Former Detroit Police Chief James Craig, thank you for your time.